It's Marley from the Energy Boutique with your energy and ascension forecast for Sunday, November 9th to Saturday, November 15th. So, of course, last week we kicked the door down. We entered into November with a whole lot of energy. And of course, those dominoes started to fall with Mars shifting out of his rulership in that Scorpio energy. He sat there for like 2 days at the 29th critical crisis karmic degree, which definitely brought on the weight, the funk, the darkness, the shadow, the emotional triggers and activations in order to test us, to see how much mastery we actually have within us to control the energy when tough things happen. And of course, many of us did not pass that particular test, but it was hard to kind of pinpoint what actually triggered and activated us, because when Mars shifted into Sagittarius, we definitely felt the fire start to rise. There was a spiciness that took over, and we definitely burned off some of that emotional weight, that junk, that gunk, that emotional energy, if you will. But that took place on the 4th. And the minute that Mars actually entered into that Sagittarius energy, we were already in the full moon energy window. Of course, we had the full moon pop off at 13 degrees Taurus energy on the 5th, which typically speaking marks the halfway point in this Scorpio season, where death, destruction, endings, closures are definitely needed in order for us to kind of clean the space, clear the space for us to build something new. We're not there yet, but that particular full moon illuminated where it is that we're still holding on to the old, where it is that we have to let that old go. And interestingly enough, we had Venus, the ruler over that Taurus energy, sit at the 28th critical crisis karmic degree while that full moon was popping off. She was in her other rulership in Libra energy. And at 28 degrees, of course, we had the new moon in Libra pop off at 28 degrees. We have all of these new moons taking place at 28 degrees from now until the end of the astrological calendar. So there is a high significance of finding Venus at this 28th degree, trying to bring peace, harmony, and contentment back into our lives by realizing what we have to let go of, where the heaviness, where the weight is actually tipping the scales against us, and coming to a certain term of acceptance on letting go of some people, places, and things actually releases that weight and brings those scales back into balance. Now, Venus, she shifted into Scorpio energy the day after on the 6th. And of course, now we're all in this mood, this attitude of the dark feminine energy rising. We're not messing around in Scorpio energy, where we were afraid to be the bad guy in Libra energy. We have no problem bossing up into those roles, those responsibilities in Scorpio energy. Passions, desires are running very, very deep, very, very intense. We are willing to fight for our happiness, our joy. We are kind of weighing the pros and cons of who is willing to kind of fight for us as well. And because this Scorpio energy is definitely going to help us kind of muddle through the darkest parts of our passions, of our desires, specifically where the fears, the doubts, the insecurities creep up, preventing us from actually going after said passion, said desire, we have a lot of, I'm going to call it intense energy rising to the surface so that we are going to finally honor our heart space. We've been working towards this particular empowerment energy for a very long time, specifically with Venus's transit. And in Scorpio energy, we are definitely going to be kind of doing the hard part, which is cutting certain people, places, and things out of our lives so that we can start building a realm and reality that not only looks good, not only feels good, but that we don't have to run away from. And that's essentially the highlight of activating the creator abilities. And of course, we have Uranus, the Great Awakener, retrograding back into the 29th critical crisis karmic degree in Taurus energy here today on the 7th. And so if you're with me here Friday evening, first of all, thank you so much for being here. But we are literally waiting for Uranus to dip back into that Taurus energy. And that is definitely going to shake things up once again in a totally different way than we've been shaken and stirred as of late. And of course, there is a play-by-play on how to manage these energies and what we need to be doing in order to wrap up these particular cycles that you can be tapping into over on my Patreon or on my website. Now, before I start talking about that, let's talk about what we got going on this week. We aren't going to see as much craziness, chaos, as many moving parts this week as we did in the very first week of November, but it is still hella eventful, meaning Mercury's going retrograde here on the 9th, and he's going to be retrograding in Sagittarius energy for starters. And then he kind of works his way back into those earlier degrees. He's going to have a second meetup with Mars, who is now in Sagittarius energy as well, before he dips back into Scorpio energy. And he shifts back into Scorpio energy on the 18th. And so the interesting dynamic is, of course, Mars is already trying to take action, to make moves, to pursue new passions, to pursue new paths. We have a new truth, new mission, new purpose that we want to pursue. But with Mercury now retrograding in the Sagittarius energy, those plans need to be revisited and revised. And so there is going to be a slight pause that Mars is going to feel while he continues his journey through Sagittarius, because Mercury has to kind of go back to the drawing board, so to speak. And a lot of the beliefs that we thought we were definitely aligned with, those are going to be challenged. A lot of the, let's call them dreams that we were percolating on, those are going to shift as well. When Mercury retrogrades, there is this whole reflection back. We have to revisit our plans, our ideas, our passions, our desires, our truth, our mission, our purpose. Specifically in the Sagittarius energy, it is about our belief system. It is about the quest, the adventure that we thought we were going to be pursuing. And now there's going to be some curveballs thrown at us. And now we're going to have to revisit what that path, what that plan actually looks like. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't want anybody cringing saying, oh no, Mercury retrograde, because we need Mercury retrograde in order to pause from taking action, making moves, from pushing ourselves into new territory, to kind of see where it is that we're at, to see where it is that, again, there's some lingering old ideals or old truths or old dreams, visions still hanging on that we have to kind of go back, cut the cord with. And of course, we will do that cord cutting when Mercury shifts back into that Scorpio energy. That's when we're going to put a death ending and closure to a lot of the ideas, a lot of the plans that we thought we were going to be pursuing. We're going to put an end to them then. Of course, Mercury's whole retrograde, he's going to go back to the 20th degree of Scorpio energy before he goes direct. And then we're going to have to retrace our steps yet again. And that's going to be a very interesting dynamic, specifically because we have all of these major heavy hitting planets doing a little bit of a cha-cha-cha as well. What do you mean? Well, November 11th, the 11th day of the 11th month, of course, it carries a very heavy weight. It always does. There's this residual energy from, well, I'm in Canada, so we celebrate Remembrance Day. I know in the States, I think it's Veterans Day. And to be honest with you, I'm hella ignorant outside of the, these places on how y'all out in the world and other places honor those that have kind of fought for your freedoms and fought for, where it is that we're at right now. Every year, there's a heaviness, there's a weight that kind of gets reverberated through the cosmos because the majority of the collective is kind of focused on the seriousness, the somberness of, trying to pay our respects, if you will, to those that have come before us. There's always that weight. It is nothing new. However, this time around, this year is going to be a little bit different. Because Jupiter, the planet of growth, expansion, beliefs, abundance, blessings, literally the most optimistic planet that we have working for us in our little, solar system here, Jupiter's going to be retrograding. And he's retrograding at 25 degrees in Cancer energy. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This isn't going to be fun. First of all, when Jupiter retrogrades, there's like this inner pull that we get. We have to move within ourselves with every retrograde that a planet goes through because there's some inner reworkings that we have to do before we can kind of, make things happen out in the external realm. But when Jupiter retrogrades, we get low on optimism. We get low on positivity. We get low on our ability to pluck out the silver linings. We get low on our ability to want to grow, want to evolve. And that's a tricky thing because people are already at the end of the rope. And to be going retrograde and creating all of those things specifically in Cancer energy, where we have to essentially reprocess the emotions of the past, the memories of the past, the attachments to the past before we can move on and move forward. This is one of the major things that many people this year specifically have been avoiding and have been resisting at all costs, is doing a deep dive into that emotional baggage that you've been carrying either consciously or unconsciously into this present moment, expecting new opportunities to kind of, unfold differently than how opportunities unfolded in the past, when realistically speaking, they're going to unfold in the exact same way because you're still holding on to these emotional patterns, this emotional baggage, these emotional connections. And until we can truly free ourselves from the heaviness and the weight of those particular memories and emotions, we are just going to repeat the same patterns, the same cycles over and over and over again. And of course, we can't do that. We don't want to do that. And as I've been kind of talking about, we're in the year of 9. This is when we shit or get off the pot. This is when push comes to shove. This is when we have to wrap up and tie up those loose endings, karmic chapters of the past, because we're entering into 2026, which is a year of 1. And not only that, we have all of these major heavy hitting planets moving on and moving forward next year. And there's an element of permanency, not only with their particular transits and what they anchor in, but the choices and the decisions that we're going to be making next year are going to be essentially the choices and decisions that we set in stone that we're going to be building upon for the next 9-year chapter. So it's a very important time right now for us to boss up and to do the hard things that we've been avoiding doing, which is kind of, feeling our way through a lot of the emotions, a lot of the memories that we have repressed, that we blocked out, that we are carrying with us into the present moment, that essentially come out, skeletons creep out of the closet, they ruin a good thing, and we can't afford to do that next year. So This time, Jupiter going retrograde is going to be in an emotional rewiring, an emotional restructuring. And that sounds beautiful and it's very needed. But the part that's going to be difficult for most people is giving yourself that permission to really feel it, right? You have to feel it in order to heal it. And we're coming to a very pivotal point where we're not going to be able to run and hide anymore. And so that particular retrograde is going to be an interesting dynamic just because, with Mercury retrograde, specifically right now in Sagittarius energy, that is kind of revisiting certain ideas, certain missions, certain truths, certain purposes that we're anchored in right now, and realizing with Jupiter going retrograde, where it is that a lot of our belief system on this present moment and what we're capable of as far as building something new in the future realm is highly connected, dependent upon, in some cases restricted and limited due to our past, due to choices that we've made, emotions that we've repressed, memories that we've blocked out. There's going to be a huge wave, trigger, activation of memories, of emotions that come out of nowhere in order for you to feel it in your physical body and move through the process of soothing it, of recalibrating it, of realigning it before we can move on and move forward. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything here. That's going to be a tough part for a lot of people. Now, that's not all. On the 12th, which is just one day after this, Jupiter retrograde and the heaviness and the weight of the reverberatory effect of remembrance, on the 12th, we're going to have our last quarter moon pop off. Now, it's popping off at 20 degrees in Leo energy. So that's the heart and soul of the zodiac. And the last quarter moon is, of course, a reflection back to the new moon in Libra that we're currently still very much under the influence of. And we're kind of figuring out, again, in the last quarter moon phase, it's about realizing who and what needs to stay, needs to go. In order to put into perspective what we have to remove, release, and eliminate from now until the new moon in Scorpio that will be popping off on the 20th of November. And again, it's taking place at 28 degrees. So this is a critical crisis mastery degree. And the Leo energy, of course, is how we bring our authentic vibration, our soul signature into the physical body, and how we're going to express and animate that particular authenticity through this physical ego avatar, through this meat suit. And so this is why the Leo energy, it does get us all up in that heart space. It does activate a boldness, a bravery, a courage that we haven't had, that we're going to need in order to do the hard things. We are in Scorpio season. So we're at the point where, the last quarter moon is always a phase of realizing who and what needs to stay, needs to go, and eliminating those particular factors. But under the umbrella of Scorpio season, where death endings and closures need to take place in order for the evolution of our soul to actually upgrade into that Phoenix energy where we get to resurrect ourselves in a much more powerful way, this is definitely going to be intense on that heart space. We have a lot of heart activations taking place here this week. We'll talk about that more in just a second. So yeah, we do have back-to-back energies taking place. Again, like I previously mentioned, November is kind of a back-to-back domino effect with all of the astro shifts taking place. But again, we're in an accelerated boot camp training here in November. We have a lot to wrap up. We have a lot that we can't run from, that we can't avoid anymore. And with these particular astro shifts kind of taking place when they're taking place, it's going to be a beautiful thing. Not to mention, side note, Mercury being retrograde and then coming into a conjunction with Mars, that is our heart space, our head space, trying to align with our actions. And again, Mars is going to be hella frustrated because he gets put on pause long before he actually was able to take actions and moves, because we have to rethink some things. We have to redefine our truth, redefine our mission, our purpose, question some things before we're going to be able to kind of move on and move forward. So that particular conjunction, the second of three, is going to be a very interesting dynamic because, again, with Mercury retrograde, we're rethinking a lot of things. We're seeing different perspectives emerge that we either weren't open to the first time around or wasn't available to us the first time around. So that will be an interesting dynamic as well. Let me also just say that emotionally speaking, it's going to be a trigger happy type of week, although there's not a whole lot of happy points to it because we are doing the depths of the shadow work here this week. Why I say that is because we start the week off with the moon in her rulership in Cancer energy. We have that last quarter moon activation in Leo energy. We move into Virgo energy, which of course is an echo to the eclipse season that we had a couple of, well, I was going to say weeks, but technically we're in months now, back in September. There's going to be a reverberatory type of echo there. And again, Virgo energy is all about analyzing and weeding out, the factors that are kind of cluster effing our headspace, and Mercury rules over Virgo energy as well. So there's going to be an interesting dynamic pop off, kind of reanalyzing and reassessing what needs our time, energy, and attention. But we end the week off with the moon in Libra energy. And that's going to be a reverberatory echo from the new moon in Libra that we had. And, Libra energy, as much as we want to find peace, harmony, and balance, we typically have to live through the extremes in order to do so. And, what comes after Libra energy? That's right, Scorpio energy, which means that we are working our way towards that new moon in Scorpio that, again, will be kind of taking place the following week on the 20th, pretty much the last day of Scorpio season, again, taking place at 28 degrees. And we're going to have Mercury retrograde back into Scorpio before that happens. So that's going to be a different play for us to be kind of tapping into, not this week coming, but the week following. So let me also just kind of throw in there an interesting fun fact, because you know me, I love fun facts. Literally like an hour-ish before Jupiter retrogrades on the 11th, the moon is going to be in her rulership in Cancer energy at that time. The moon and Jupiter conjunct. They come together for an activation before Jupiter retrogrades, which I think is going to be very profound. I don't know that you're going to be able to necessarily prepare for the wave of emotion that is going to crash over all of us when that particular energy gets activated. But just keep in mind that Jupiter tends to over exaggerate whatever it is that he's touching. And because we're hella sensitive and we're kind of introverted and we're stuck in the past and there's a lot of emotional processing going on with the moon in Cancer, when they conjunct, there's going to be an over exaggerated state of emotion. And I need you to hold on to that. Okay. I need you to remember that, because you're going to feel things so intensely that it could actually be paralyzing. And then when Jupiter retrogrades, there's some immediate interactions that are going to, again, magnify and intensify and over exaggerate the state of being that we find ourselves in. And it's going to be a very temperamental time. Okay, I'll just leave it at that. I'll talk about some of those ascension symptoms, about what to expect here in just a second from that. But I wanted to set that scene for you because specifically, like, Tuesday, Wednesday, it's going to be back-to-back effery, energetic effery, energetic intensity that you're literally going to feel like you may feel like you're going to explode. And it is going to be short-lived, but it is going to be hella intense. And I think that if you don't have that heads up, that it could take people by surprise in the worst kind of way. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there. Okay, so before I start talking about some of the ascension symptoms, just a couple of notes, and then we're going to dive right into it because I do have a very long list of things to talk about here this week. First of all, I just want to thank those of you that have actually made the decision to actively engage in doing this work. Specifically, I've seen a lot of new people come over to the website, download those astro forecasts, download, the November energy overview. All of those audios are now available pay-per-view on my website, and I love seeing that people are actually interested in doing that. I've seen a lot of new people actually come to the website and download their zodiac guide for the month of November as well, which is just hella reassuring to me because sometimes I love seeing new people make the decision to want to do this work. So many people fall off the wagon, get back on, fall off the wagon, get back on. But I think that because we are essentially at a particular point in the calendar where there is a new wave, a new group of people being activated in their awakening or in the intensity of doing the healing work, it makes me feel good to see new people especially, but even old people come back on the wagon and actively engage with doing the work. And first of all, thank you to those people that are doing that. Secondary to that, I am still actively working on my website in order to make the whole experience a lot easier, a lot more organized. And so I guess what I'm getting at is for those of you that actually came to the website and downloaded all of those things individually, there is going to be a much more cost-efficient way to access all of that content with a one-stop shop type of thing the minute that I can get this website up and going, which I have a plan. I'm aiming for a goal, but I'm going to keep that to myself just in case I miss that mark. I just want to thank those of you, again, doing the work. And again, if you're on my Patreon, actively doing the work each and every single day, thank you so much. We really need people to dig deep right now and to boss up and to start doing the work in order to not only set your own self up for success in 2026, but to help the collective. And we need all the help that we can get. And so thank those of you that are still continuing to do the work and the newcomers that are doing the work. I really, really do appreciate you, leaning in and choosing this discomfort in order to boss up, in order to activate your creator abilities, in order to have you on the team. So thank you so much for that. Also, just want to kind of point out there, the year ahead readings for 2026. I will be closing that particular option for booking probably November 18th. That's my birthday. And so I'm not taking any more bookings for normal sessions thus far this year. And I will not be taking any more requests for those year ahead 2026 readings after November 18th. So if that was something that you were looking to reserve a spot on, I would definitely recommend that you snag a spot throughout the course of this next coming week. And hopefully you'll get that spot before I shut that part down. And so I just wanted to kind of put that out there. With all of that being said, let's dive into the Ascension symptoms this week. Again, shameless plug. I did write a book. It's the Ascension Manual. It is named exactly for what it is, which means that if you are struggling to understand the energetics of your own body, the chakra system, what that means, what that connects to, the emotions, the mentality that is activated when those particular energy centers get activated by the environment, by the external electromagnetic frequency, I would definitely recommend that you download that book or that you order a hard copy off of Amazon. I love, and thank you so much for those of you that have reached out as of late to let me know how helpful that book has been for you in this healing journey. I love that you all are using, the transits in which I'm talking about as a reference to go to the back of the book and kind of look things up and aha, I'm experiencing exactly that. How amazing. Again, whole reason why I wrote the book was to be able to help people help themselves through this particular journey. The direction that I'm trying to take from this year into next is for people to be more independent. I want to do less hand holding. I need people to be doing the work, but doing it independently on their own. This is part of the process of knowing thyself and healing thyself and empowering yourself. And so a lot of the changes and transformations that I myself am making to my offering, the services, the information, the content is going to be based around like self-help. And I think for the most part, many of us spiritual warriors are kind of doing that on our own anyways. But again, I am going to encourage everyone to have that book, the Ascension Manual, as a resource, as a tool, as a guide in your toolbox to lean upon in order to figure all of this stuff out. So in typical Ascension symptom fashion, we usually start at the head. And, there's a lot going on in the headspace, specifically this week, with Mr. Mercury going retrograde. And of course, Mercury rules over the headspace. We also have to consider the fact that Uranus, who rules over the highest part of our headspace, essentially the crown, if you will, he's already, he's retrograding back into the 29th degree of Taurus energy. And that is no joke. And I went on a very probably unneeded, but also semi-interesting rant and rave about, Uranus and taking us back to 2018 and understanding, all the activations, triggers, and levels of consciousness that the collective has been able to access because of Uranus's journey over the last couple of years. And if you want access to that particular rant, again, you can jump over to my website and download pay-per-view, and all of those rants and raves and astro forecasts are, of course, included on the silver tier Patreon. But we have to consider the fact that Uranus is already kind of bringing in a lot more information, a lot more perspectives, a lot more insight than we're used to. That crown activation, yeah, we moved out of Gemini energy, so it's not overwhelming in the headspace, but now we're seeing things in our physical realm that we're questioning in a way that we would have never questioned before because of him backtracking in this Taurus energy. So we have the crown open and activated to analyze where it is that in our materialistic realm, certain things have got to go. Okay, that's the whole point of Mr. Uranus. There is a heaviness, a somberness, a seriousness that comes with those particular realizations, though, because sometimes, even though you might not want to let go, that's the right thing to do. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But where Mercury is retrograding, and again, Mercury rules over the lower level of our intellect that connects us to this human experience. Whenever he retrogrades, there's always this confusion. There's always this reassessment that goes on. Now, lucky for us, he is retrograding in Sagittarius energy. And I say that's lucky because you can't get any more optimistic and positive than Sagittarius energy. And so to revisit some of our truths, revisit some of the information, revisit our plans, yeah, it kind of feels like we're not, getting anywheres, but we're actually making major, huge strides, believe it or not. But with Mercury retrograding, first of all, we're going to feel a lot of weirdness in our head. Now, what do I mean by weirdness? Well, it's not necessarily a headache. It's not really a migraine. It's not really a moving headache, but there's definitely some fuzzies going on there. You know how you have pop rocks and they kind of fizz in your mouth, but sometimes you can feel that sensation kind of move around in the headspace. It feels like pop rocks are kind of exploding in our headspace. Now, last week, there was a lot of electrical shocks going on in our headspace because those neural pathways were being initiated and opened up in order for us to reach new vibrations and frequencies of allowing our higher self in a higher realm of intelligence actually be able to infiltrate and communicate with us on a level that we haven't been able to access within ourselves as of yet before. It's not that feeling. It's not the electrical snaps. It's not the electrical zaps. It's more fuzziness. It's more of a bubbling type of fizz sensation that we're going to be feeling in our headspace. everything just kind of feels weird. And the reason for that is because we're seeing the world around us, we're seeing topics and themes from a different lens. Mercury going retrograde is just like we put on the beer. Well, let's say we're taking off the beer goggles. When you have those beer goggles on, everything's kind of fuzzy and hazed. Well, we're kind of taking those off and we're seeing things from a different perspective, from a different lens, from a different light than we've been able to see things from. And that really confuses things, because what we thought we were fighting for, maybe we're not anymore. What we thought we were pursuing, maybe we're not interested anymore. This is a time of readjustment. And the adjustment phase that we're in, that's why everybody's uncomfortable and feeling awkward. Nobody enjoys adjustment. But now we have to kind of adjust our perspective. And so when our perspective shifts, we question everything. And when a new truth emerges, and we know that that is a new truth, and we very much resonate with it, and we very much, want to kind of trace that truth back, sometimes knowing the truth about something alters the way that we experience certain situations in the past. What do I mean about that? Okay, well, let's give a good analogy. Let's say that you're in a relationship, okay, and you've been in this relationship for like 5 years, and everything is peachy keen, right? You're with the love of your life, you're engaged, you're building and working towards getting married, you're building and working towards amalgamating your lives. And then all of a sudden you realize, whether it is in your face or not, that your partner has cheated on you, okay? So now, not only are you heartbroken and devastated, but now you start questioning, well, a year ago when, I called them and they didn't answer and they had a weird ass excuse about where they were they cheating then? Because you don't know, right? You're questioning everything. Then you're going back, well, how long has this been going on? And even if the person tells you, well, it only happened once and it just happened in the last 6 months, your memory doesn't stop there. It goes back right to the beginning of this relationship and it starts reframing. Was that true? Was that real? Was I being lied to? Was I not? Did I miss those signs? How could I miss, my partner stepping out on me? When did they start losing interest in me? Is it anything that I did? Is it something that they did? You start questioning everything. So my whole point of the matter is that sometimes it doesn't even have to be a bad truth. It just has to be a matter of fact that makes you reframe what you thought you knew. And this is exactly what is taking place with this Mercury retrograde. And it's going to distort a lot of memories and distort a lot of what we thought we believed in or what we thought was true. That's never a fun challenge, to challenge your own ideas and to challenge your own memories. It is very difficult to focus in Sagittarius energy. So it's going to be a manic, rapid processing of questioning, of second guessing, of revisiting, revising, reanalyzing everything. It's hard to focus on one thing. And so there's this like rapid processing that makes us feel a little bit cray-cray because our minds feel like it's going to explode. Again, it is a fire energy. So there is a lot of heat going on in that headspace. It does create a little bit of a fogginess, right? Like we're not seeing things clearly. And it's like, did I dream that? Was it real? And then, when you figure out that it is real, it's like, okay, so if that is real and that is the truth, then what does that mean about this situation that happened before I knew that? How does it help me reframe what it is that I'm working towards, what it is that is worth fighting for? And here's the thing is that, Sagittarius energy is very blunt, has no filter. It's straight up speaking the truth. And sometimes truth hurts. And because Mercury rules over communication and because communication doesn't go so well when Mercury's retrograde, it's a high probability that we're just going to be, spitting truth, spitting facts, verbal vomiting in ways that should require a filter, that we're not going to have a filter, which means that we're going to be hurting feelings, whether we're intending to do that or not, which means that we're going to be making a mess of things. In typical Mercury retrograde fashion, we kind of make a mess of things while Mercury is retrograde. And then once he goes direct and we see things a little bit more clearly, that's when we kind of clean up the mess, so to speak. That's when we clear the air, clean the slate. That's when we reconcile. That's where, we actually take action to, iron out the bugs that get created while Mercury is retrograde. But we also have to consider the fact that there are some physical ascension symptoms that come with this particular shift. And let me just say, yeah, the head weirdness is one of them. But there's going to be a situation where you literally bite your tongue so freaking badly that your tongue is going to bleed, or that it's very sore, or that it gets swollen, because we don't really want to hurt people's feelings. We know that we can verbal vomit. We know that we can speak without a filter, and a part of us doesn't want to do that. And so there is this unconscious element where we know we should be biting our tongue, or we have to bite our tongue, and we literally end up biting our tongue because of it. Now, that's not the only part of the mouth that I want to talk about, because it is a fire energy, because we're spitting a lot of truth and speaking a lot of fire. There's this inflammation that can take over the mouth. Now, whether you bite your tongue and it's just your tongue that gets inflamed and swollen, whether you are struggling with inflamed gums, sore gums, bleeding gums, that is an element of holding fire energy in that mouth space. There is going to be an element of like sensitivity when it comes to your teeth. So again, I don't think it's going to be anything like major dental implications, but it is going to be a little bit sore, a little bit sensitive, where your teeth maybe normally aren't. They're going to be hyper and sensitive here this week. Now, that being said, you're probably going to experience at some point this week where it feels like you burnt your tongue, and that weird ass film that kind of lingers after you do burn your tongue. There is just a lot of heat in the mouth. And the interesting dynamic is that specifically towards the end of the week, there's going to be a lot of throat tightness, like almost like your throat feels like it's closing over, or you're breathing through a straw, or it just feels like tight or sore or agitated or irritated of some sort, because again, there's a lot of fire that we're holding in. There's a lot of truth that we're trying to hold in as well. Even if you do verbal vomit and let some of that truth out, it burns. It burns you to say it. It burns other people to receive it. So there is this like fire energy that is built up in the head space and in that throat space. So what I would also want to say to that is that it kind of gets triggered and activated, the burning part, towards the end of the week when Mercury comes into a conjunction with Mars. That's really when things get spicy and things get heated. But even until that happens, we have a lot of heart activations taking place here this week, which I'm going to talk about now. But these heart activations directly correlate to the head spinning, to the perspective shifting, to the truth that we're either wanting to spit and not spitting, or the truth that we are spitting and therefore burn ourselves and other people because of. Now let's talk about these heart activations. Mostly, the heart activations are becoming very intense here this week. The moon is in Cancer. Okay, so when the moon is in Cancer in her rulership, there's always a lot of emotional processing, specifically with the heaviness and the weight of the memories, of the emotions, of the attachments to the past that we're still very much carrying and making a part of our present day. But even more than that, again, this is where I wanted to kind of talk about the conjunction. So, the moon in her rulership in this Cancer energy comes up to, bumps into, teams up with, conjuncts Jupiter just hours before Jupiter retrogrades. And so again, there's like this magnification of this intensity in our heart space. There's an over-exaggerated emotional situation that we find ourselves in. And first of all, I feel like when the moon is in Cancer energy, it's going to feel hard to breathe. Yes, we have Mercury kind of tightening the throat, so that adds a little bit of intensity to the whole not being able to breathe as deeply or as freely as we would like. But even more than that, the moon in Cancer energy, while we are in Scorpio season, that's water on water action. And it just feels like we are out in the middle of the ocean trying to kind of swim through, the old repressed memories and the old emotions, if you will. But it's almost like the pressure of the ocean, like the G-force, if you will, the pressurized system of the waves and the ocean just squeezing you so freaking tightly. When you're out in the water, treading water, and you're trying to keep your head above water so that you don't like choke on the water and die. you do get a little bit tired. You get a little bit exhausted with that particular process, and it feels harder to breathe when you're in that state of being. And, well, energetically speaking, it's going to feel like you're having a hard time keeping your head above water. It's going to feel like you're having a hard time not drowning in the emotions that need to get triggered and activated, not only in your memory, but in the physical body. This is about feeling it so we can heal it. And it's going to come with some intensities there. And it feels like it's hard to breathe. It feels like you're having a heavy heart, like there is a sadness or a grief to whatever it is that you're emotionally processing in order to provide that release so that we can bring it to a certain term of acceptance, so that we can leave it in the past, so we can move on and move forward. But I think that the real heart activations, because I think that's typical. I think that's something that we're, it might be uncomfortable, but we're kind of used to feeling. We have the moon in Cancer every month. I think the real transition is when the moon leaves Cancer energy for Leo energy. And here's why. First of all, we're going from water to fire. Okay. So that fire energy, it speeds things up. It dries us up. It dries us off from that emotion, but it starts kind of getting our heart moving at a faster pace than we're used to. And so the heart activations, once the moon moves into that Leo energy, is going to be like beating out of our chest. Like the pulsation of our heart is going to feel abnormal. It's going to feel more intense. It's going to feel like, oh my God, there's something wrong with me. I might be having like a heart event. Now, let me just cover my ass here by saying, if you're really that concerned about it, by all means, go get yourself checked out by a doctor, by a professional. I say that because I would hate to tell you to not do anything about it and then have somebody come at me because I told them not to go to the doctor. And trust me, that has happened in the past. That's why I've learned the hard way that I should cover my ass and say these things. But realistically speaking, if you do go get it seen to, there's not going to be anything wrong with you. They're literally going to look at you like you're effing crazy because you're going to be fine. This is an energetic moon and solar activation. Again, the minute that the moon shifts into that Leo energy, we will be building in intensity to that last quarter moon that we will be sitting in on the 12th. And what we have to realize is that Leo energy is bringing in a new level of authenticity of that soul signature that we are naturally of in the energetic realm into the physical body. So there has to be some discomfort there, or else it wouldn't be an upgrade. It wouldn't be bringing in new energies into the physical realm. But I do understand that people freak out when their heart starts, skipping beats or pulsating in a way that it feels like their heart is beating out of their chest. I understand. And that's why I say to you, if you're still in the fear-based narrative where you think that there is something physically wrong with you, by all means, go get yourself checked out. But do not feel disappointed that you put yourself in a situation where you're probably going to leave that emergency room with something that you didn't even walk in with because you didn't trust the process, you didn't trust yourself, you didn't trust the energies, okay? I get it. Sometimes it takes a very long time in order to trust that what you're experiencing is energetically the reason for it. And, sometimes you got to sit in the ER. Sometimes you got to learn the hard way. Sometimes you have to be gaslit by the doctors, making you feel like you're cray-cray, in order for you just to realize that maybe I should just start, having a little bit of patience and trusting the process and leaning into the resources in order to let these energies just move through me. Everybody's different. Everybody's at a different place within their journey, but at some point you do have to learn to trust yourself and to trust the energy and to trust the process. And you do have to understand that running to the emergency room is not the move. Okay. But again, use your own discretion with that. Use your own judgment by all means. But at the same time, you do have to realize that this is energetically provoked. Okay. So when the moon is in this Leo energy, we're going to have all of those things take place. But I think that's when we're going to start experiencing heartburn, the acidity, if you will, making the heart space a little bit verklempt, a little bit cluster-effed, a little bit tight, if you will. And a lot of the reason for that is because we're burning to kind of express ourselves fully. And we are burning to be bold and brave and courageous enough to say the damn thing, to do the damn thing, to move to where it is that you're afraid to move to. Whatever the fears, doubts, and insecurities that you're currently sitting in are, the boldness, the bravery, the courage of the moon in Leo really inspires us to fully express ourselves, to fully take action and make moves in ways that we're not prepared to do as of yet. So we keep that energy in. It's got nowheres to go. So it moves through the, connective tissue, and it moves through the central nervous system, and it doesn't feel so good or feel so great. But, that's part of how energy medicine kind of moves and happens, and how it appears and how it dissolves just as fast. The interesting dynamic, of course, is going to take real hard focus on our gut. Why? Well, we talk about digestion every week, mostly because we have to understand that Ascension symptoms are electrically charged, meaning we are learning how to hold this high level of electricity in our body without burning our central nervous system out. And for many of us, it's a struggle right now. Our central nervous system is dysregulated and jacked up through trauma responses. What we also have to understand is that there's a lot of nerves in the digestive system, and that mentally and emotionally speaking, whatever it is that you're feeling and thinking directly impacts the nerves in your gut. And so when we're kind of all balled up in an emotional knot, such as the moon in Cancer, there's going to be a sadness, a grief that affects the digestive system, which means that we're a little bit queasy, we're a little bit nauseous, right? When the moon not only is in her rulership, but we're in a water season, think of being seasick, right? That's the type of sensation that we're going to experience because of the elemental dominancy of those water energies. So we're going to feel a little bit nauseous, a little bit queasy, a little bit seasick. When the moon shifts into Leo energy, for example, we're going to be a little bit spicy. We're going to be hot and heated, if you will. And that is going to create a lot of hunger pains, right? We need fuel to keep that fire lit. And so that's when the heartburn kicks in. That's when the bubble guts kick in, because we're going to be kind of stuffing our faces, if you will, trying to eat our way through the emotions that we're feeling. And we're going to be burning through it. But when the moon shifts into Virgo energy, which it will towards, the end of the week, Virgo energy is always hard on the digestion, because we worry and we carry a lot of anxiety because we're analyzing everything. We're trying to think everything, through. We're trying to pre-plan for things that aren't going to happen in the way that we perceive that they're going to happen anyways. There's just a lot of anxiousness that comes with the Virgo energy. And so when you're worried or when you're anxious, you got, flutters in your guts. You have a situation where you're either, holding on to shit, literally and figuratively speaking, or that shit is running through you fast. And that is going to create a little bit of a weird bathroom situation, right? So the Virgo energy always kind of gets those gastric juices flowing, overflowing, if you will, creating an unhappy place in that digestive system. And then when the moon shifts into Libra energy, that's where we kind of regain the balance in our digestive system as well. So, we talk about the digestive issues pretty much every week because the central nervous system is active every week. And with the moon moving through her rulership and really activating, Jupiter, and then shifting into the Leo, the Virgo energy, that always does a number on our guts anyways. And so we're basically emotionally reacting to whatever we're processing, because we are in Scorpio season. So processing and alchemy is the name of the game. But our eating habits, our cravings, or our nauseousness is going to be highly dependent on whatever we're mentally focused on and what we're emotionally connected to as far as processing goes. So this brings us to, I want to talk about maybe the shoulders and the neck for a second. Now, Mercury's retrograde, we already talked about the throat and the mouth and the heat and the tension and the tightness there. But that kind of, affects the neck. The neck and the shoulders have been bearing a great weight as of late because we aren't really prepared to do what needs to be done, but we're kind of coming to the last hurrah where our back is against a wall, and we're definitely feeling that pressure. Now, the shoulder pain, I would say, is going to radiate to the middle of the back, like on our spine, in between our shoulder blades here this week, because we're processing a lot of emotions and memories from the past. And when you think about the heart and you look at the heart from the back of your body, we're going to find that heart being placed in between the shoulder blades. And anything that is kind of being activated in the back is due to past energy, past emotion. If it was happening on your chest, like in the front of your chest, let's say you broke out on a rash, or let's say that there was an intensity, on the front part of your chest, well, that is anxiety and anticipation for future events. This week, we're doing a lot of past review. And so we're going to feel that tension, not only in our neck space, not only the weight on our shoulders that we're carrying, but it's going to start kind of balling up in between the shoulder blades. Now, how do we unpack that? Well, you got to get real with yourself, and you got to get real and call yourself out on your own bullshit, specifically on what it is that you're holding on to as far as routines, habits, relationships go that you shouldn't have any business even being involved in, let alone desperately holding on to, desperately trying to keep that shit alive. Again, Uranus retrograding back into Taurus energy is going to illuminate for you where it is that you're the problem. You're the one who can't move on. You're the one that can't create the progress because you're holding on to dead weight. And that dead weight, that dead horse has got to go. But here's the real deal of what's happening here. We are in I'm going to call it an anticipatory protection zone. What do I mean by that? Well, we're bracing for impact, in case you haven't noticed. Like, take a deep breath right now. Squeeze your body very, very tightly, all the muscles that you can. Like, squeeze yourself very, very tightly. Hold it for 3 seconds and then let it go. Do you feel how that energy wave moves through your body in a way that brings attention to your physical form that you never really paid attention to as of yet? Do you realize how rigid you're actually carrying yourself and not even recognizing it through your day-to-day? What we're dealing with is that we are bracing for impact. We know that we're in for a shit ton of change and transformation. None of us know what that means. We know that we are in for a lot of emotional processing as far as past situations, circumstances, and memories go. And we're bracing for impact. And that impact is nothing to actually even be afraid of. It's nothing to even prepare for, but we're holding ourselves in a very rigid, very protective type of way because we're not willing at this particular point to voluntarily feel what it is that we need to heal. Now that's coming at you whether you like it or not. And I'm going to really encourage you and remind you that it's better to roll than be dragged. But again, we're human beings, and until our back is against a wall and we're hella uncomfortable, we're not going to do what we need to be doing. So a lot of this tension that we're going to be feeling in our shoulders, in our neck, in between our shoulder blades is the protection bubble that we're kind of creating right now, that we're anticipating, shitstorms coming at us. And so we're trying to brace ourselves for that. And, it's just one of those things that if you're consciously aware of how rigid and how tightly you're actually holding your body, that you can kind of release it, like the practice that we just did. It doesn't take very much. Literally, let's do it again. Let's take a deep breath. And as you're breathing in, let's count to 3, okay? And as you're counting to 3, you're clenching everything you got. You're clenching your jaw, you're clenching your neck, you're balled up, right? Just clench everything you got, all your muscles, everything together. Squeeze your legs together, squeeze everything together, okay? You're counting to 3. Hold it, and now let it go, right? Breathe that breath out as deep as you can for a count of 3. Let the wiggles take over your body. You feel that energy moving through your body. You feel that releasing energy. That is an indicator of how tight you have been keeping your physical form. It's a very good practice to, 2-3 times a day to clench everything and unclench just to get the meridian channels opened up so that you're consciously aware of the state in which you're holding yourself in. Anywho, so here's the thing. This week, I want to talk about Jupiter for a second. This week, I already talked about how the moon in her rulership in Cancer energy conjuncting Jupiter prior to him going retrograde is going to create an overwhelming state of emotion. When I say to you that the waves of the emotional ocean are going to get to tsunami heights here this week, I'm just trying to prepare you for the weirdness of having thoughts and memories kind of crash over you that you haven't thought of in years. I'm trying to prepare you to smell smells that throw you back 20 years ago into situations and circumstances that you didn't even remember until you smelled that smell. I'm just trying to prepare you for the fact that this is going to be a very uncomfortable transit. This is very much needed. Let me also just say that the brunt, the intensity of these particular energies are worse when a planet usually stations retrograde, such as Jupiter is doing here on the 11th. It is going to be intense while it's happening, and then it's going to get a little bit, a little bit more subtle. And then it's going to be a little bit calmer until Jupiter is going to prepare to go direct again, which we won't even have to talk about until the new year. The reason I want to prepare you for this is because this is how, and again, I'm going to have to talk about timeline jumping and quantum leaping and Mandela effects to a certain extent in order to really paint this picture as clearly as I would like. Because we have all of these major energy shifts happening, because we jump timelines, because we upgrade in our quantum field, because we have these energetic upgrades to open up neural pathways in our brain to receive more information and complex insight that will help us eventually piece together where it is that we want to go. Because all of those fragments, are alive and well. What this is, Jupiter retrograding in Cancer energy specifically, is a defrag, a review, if you will, of the old memory and data files that we have to go through. Again, talking about a computer system, we need to create more space. We need to create more space in our memory drive. We need to install new programs in order to help this new quest that we're going on next year, but we don't have the space in our memory to do that. And so Jupiter going retrograde in Cancer energy is attempting to clear out the fragmented emotional field, the memory field as well, that goes along with those particular emotions. And that's why we're going to feel like the waves of emotion are crashing upon us and the memory waves are crashing through us and we're being triggered and activated in our body. We need to feel it in order to heal it. So when you smell a smell that throws you 20 years in the past, don't try to block it out. Feel it, okay? If you get triggered and activated in a memory that is absolutely paralyzing to you, don't try to block it out. Feel it so you can heal it. People aren't good with doing that. People are going to want to turn to a numbing agent. And of course, with Neptune retrograde at 29 degrees in Pisces, that's the last thing that you should be doing, is trying to numb your state of being in any kind of way. But because Jupiter kind of brings out the low confidence, the low level of optimism, the harder time plucking out the silver linings, because it is about the release of the energy that you are unconsciously holding in your body, tears could come out of nowhere. A wave of heat could take over your body, and then all of a sudden you feel like you're going to puke. There could just be this sensory destabilization, again, with Uranus now retrograde in Taurus energy. This is about destabilizing the physical body so that we can release a lot of the garbage that we're holding on to, so that we can actively start regulating our central nervous system to be able to hold and house the amount of energy that we're going to need to learn to house on a daily basis if we're going to survive the solar flares that are coming at us here next year. There's just a lot of purging and releasing that we're going to have to do. And in Cancer energy, that is never fun, nor is it easy. And I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but I'm semi-concerned for this particular transit for those that are already on the verge of mental instability, those that are already struggling with spiritual and religious psychosis. I really am semi-concerned with the planets and where they're at, that with Jupiter kind of going retrograde in Cancer in this way, that this is going to be the straw that breaks the camel back, essentially. And I hate that for people, but at the same time, we all got soul contracts. We all got certain exit points. And if some people are going to take those exit points, you just gotta be, I guess, okay with them not being okay. But I also think that we're reaching a particular point in Scorpio season, and now with Venus in Scorpio specifically, where we reach a breaking point, not a breakdown point, but a breaking point in realizing what the F we're done with. Okay. So it's just going to be like, you know what? I'm done with you. Or you know what? I'm done with this. Or you know what? I'm not talking about this anymore. There's going to be people quitting their jobs without a real plan. There's going to be people breaking out of relationship dynamics without a plan. There's going to be people just reaching a F this, I'm done point, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're reaching that point in a place of empowerment versus reaching that point from a placement of desperation and depression. You know, it's a very thin line. And I am semi-concerned for the majority of the group of the collective out there because they're already unstable AF. Take a good look around. People are losing their damn minds. But at the same time, I feel, that I need to give you that particular warning. Now, that feeling of F this, I'm done, that's probably going to percolate and take over closer to the end of the week. I would say Friday, more specifically than not. And when that happens, I feel like most people either pre-reaching the F this, I'm done, or at the F this, I'm done point are going to be experiencing a lot of pain, a lot of discomfort in their lower back. Because again, the lower back, the root chakra, is our survival programming. And a lot of people are faking their happiness, their joy right now, just for survival purposes. And when you reach that F this, I don't give an F, I'm done point, that's when your survival programming gets shook up again, gets activated in a real way. So just expect there to be some lower back discomfort towards the end of this week, either building towards that F this, I'm done, I'm out type of phase, or as it's actually happening. Now, to get to that particular point, you have to be physically or emotionally or spiritually or mentally exhausted, right? You can only take so much. And I think that many of us are, at that exhaustive point in many ways anyway. And so again, with Jupiter retrograding, where we have to work harder to muster up that confidence, that optimism, those silver linings, to want to grow, to want to push through these challenges, it's going to be harder to do that. And people are already having a hard time, even with as much support as we've been gifted. With some of the major heavy hitting planets giving us that support system, people have still been struggling to stop complaining and stop whining and to do the hard things and to boss up and be confident and continue to charge onwards and actually face the challenges that we know that we need to face in order to actually take our power back. I think that this week, most in particular, we are going to be experiencing the hot parts of the surges going through our physical body. Last couple of weeks, we've kind of been more on the cold side than anything else. I think that the heat needs to come to help break through a lot of the emotional blockages that we are experiencing or will be experiencing here this week that we're having a hard time letting go of. We need that heat to break through those blockages. Does it feel good moving through the body? Absolutely not. But we have to let it happen. Now, let me also just say that with these heat surges coming through, and it can be just a wave of heat that comes and goes with nothing, with no other indicator, or it could come with blood pressure spikes. It could come with anger, frustration, specifically towards the end of the week. Mars and Pluto kind of take center stage. They are in the rulership over Scorpio energy. Scorpio season here, but they are interacting in ways with other different planetary placements that do bring out that shadow, do bring out that anger, that frustration. The power and control issues that we're dealing with right now, which of course is a very Scorpio season topic and theme. Either not feeling in power, not feeling in control, or wanting that power, wanting that control. Sometimes you need to get angry in order to do shit. We always talk about like how love and happiness is the only fuel that we need. No, I'm going to be honest with you. I have never made major changes in my life because I was happy about it, because I was in love. Okay. The major changes that I've made in my life have been out of pure anger, pure sick as F of situations and circumstances, right? And so what I'm getting at is sometimes you need that fire, that fuel to burn through you. Sometimes you need to get burned yourself in order to do the hard thing. And sometimes, because we are in a situation where we are building towards the fighting the good fight, so to speak, we do need to get into fight mode. We need to start fighting for ourselves, fighting for our happiness, fighting for our joy, fighting for our freedom. I hate to say that because specifically down in the States, they are concocting, this civil unrest in order to have people actually fight in the streets so that they can declare martial law, so that Buddy up top can stay in for longer than he's permitted to. There's all a plan there. And if you don't see the plan, it's very unfortunate that you don't see the plan, because when you do see the plan, you don't freak out, right? And you understand what they want from you. And that's when you can resist giving it to them. And so instead of going out in the streets and fighting your neighbor over bullshit that doesn't matter, let's fight for our own power. Let's fight for our own freedom. Let's fight for our own sovereignty. Let's fight for our own happiness, fight for our own joy. Not everyone is worth fighting for. Not everything is worth fighting for. And as Mercury retrogrades, we're going to be taking a good look at who is worthy and deserving of that particular fight. This week, I think that we're going to be mismatched with both deja vu and with glimmers. Now, I talked about glimmers before. Glimmers are deja vu that happens in a futuristic realm. Well, deja vu is more of a remembrance, like, I've been here before. I truly believe that deja vu and the glimmers are both an indicator that we have reached a particular checkpoint in the timeline that we're currently walking that kind of validates for us that we're where it is that we need to be. Yes, the deja vu is a remembrance that we've done this before, because again, we get reset time and time again to live out this simulation and actually make better choices than we made the last time around. And so that deja vu is very real of feeling like we did this before, because spoiler alert, we did. Now the glimmers, the shimmers are a little bit different because we're gaining a visual. We're gaining confirmation of what now is actually possible for us in this timeline that we're currently walking. So there is going to be a split between, reframing the past and reframing the future. And we have all this Cancer energy reframing the past, and we have Mercury reframing the future. And so this is why we're going to feel I don't even want to call it a tug of war. I think it's an overlap, if anything else, of both past energies and issues versus future energies and issues. I'm going to just talk about the dream state just quickly because, when we have planets go retrograde, it takes us into a different dimension of the dream realm. And we do a little bit more of a deep dive in the subconscious parts of our being. And obviously that has to alter the dream state and the dreamscaping in which we do every night. So I did want to mention that, because anytime I leave out dreams, people are always like, is there anything weird going on with dreams this week? Because I've been having a weird dream state. And it's like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel bad that I sit down here every week and I just regurgitate the same thing over and over again. But the Ascension symptoms are the same from week to week because the energy is the same, trying to break through the holding patterns of the past. So I didn't want to leave the dreams out. So there you go. I mentioned that. But the last thing that I really wanted to talk about is the solar plexus. And so the solar plexus is right below your rib cage center in the rib cage. It is a contributor to the digestive issues. It is a contributor to the heartburn or to the gas bubbles, the bubble guts. But what I really wanted to talk about is that when the moon is in Virgo here this week, we are going to obviously have the moon in Virgo come up to, bump into, conjunct the south node in Virgo, which means that the moon in Virgo is going to be opposing the north node in Pisces, which of course is the eclipse axis that we are currently learning the tough love life lessons, karmically speaking, through here this year. But the reason why I want to talk about the solar plexus is because we're going to have an over-exaggerated ascension symptom type of realization there, because we're going to be releasing a lot of the harsh judgment and criticism that we've held very tightly, specifically projecting upon thyself. And so that moon in Virgo is highly judgmental, highly critical, specifically on oneself. But because the south node is what we have to release, we're going to be releasing that particular casting of judgment, that casting of criticism, that, Betty the bully, negative Nancy narrative that we like to kind of, push on ourselves. We're releasing a part of that intensity. And although that's a great thing, we feel the reverberatory effects of that being released through an ascension symptom, through the energy being balled up right below your rib cage, and of course affecting all the biological organs, physiological organs in your body, heart space, heart activation, your guts, of course, your digestion. That is your center. And because we are trying to basically find our new core center, there is a lot of unpacking in order for us to get down to the real nitty gritty core of who it is that we are and what it is that we're made of. And as we peel back the layers of criticism, of judgment, of fear, of doubt, of insecurity, of memories, of, all of that things that we're processing here this week, there is going to be a major cluster F of energy and therefore a discomfort really kind of percolate in that area of our body as well. But it's going to come on fast. It's going to pass just as fast. And we're going to be lighter, better, stronger, more sure of ourselves because of it. So guys, that is all the information that I have for you for this week. It is not going to be a bad week at all. There's definitely some cautionary notes, but if you're doing the work and you're leaning into the discomfort, you should have a no problem whatsoever kind of riding the energetic waves. If you are a little bit resistant, you are going to be dragged. It is going to be a bumpy ride. Definitely do what you need to do in order to protect yourself the best of your ability. But we are going through this change and transformation, whether you like it or not, whether you're volunteering for it or not, whether you are a willing participant or not. We need to go through it. We have a lot of time to make up for, a lot of work to make up for, and we are definitely starting to feel that squeeze. I thank you so much for tuning in. I send you so much love, and we'll talk to you soon.